Hello everyone, it's me Matt. This is the Explorer's Box. It's day 24 and it is our final day of tutorials before we reveal everything we have made. Today is part 2 of our chainmail collar project. I've got our chain from yesterday and I'm going to be making all of the leather parts to go around to finish it into a final product. Come closer and I'll show you exactly what you're going to need. Obviously we're going to need our chain. We're going to need a scalpel, a cutting mat, a steel rule, some leather, some more leather, some leather dye if our leather isn't quite the correct colour, a hole punch, either one of these or a rotary one that you've seen before, some threads and a needle to go with it. Ta-da. You're going to want some rivets, a buckle and a hammer. I believe that's everything. First of all, we need to draw out our pattern on the leather. This collar, as I've said before, we're making it 14 inches or 35.5 centimetres. So we are going to mark on the leather a rectangle that is 14 inches long or 35.5 centimetres long and 50 mil high, because that is the height of our collared sections. Onto that, we want to add onto both sides a strap. One of these is going to be the strap that has the holes in, that goes through the buckle, and the other side is going to be the strap that has the buckle on. These can be relative lengths, it's kind of up to you. I usually do the strap that comes off, that goes into the buckle, 18 centimetres. You know, it could be 15, it could be 10. It really depends on how much extra length you need. If you've made this to measure and it's exactly your size, then that strap can be smaller. However, if it's one size fits all and you need it to fit more than one person or whatever, or you might want to wear it with or without padded clothing, that can be longer. And the one on this side, I usually do around 10-12 centimetres. This is the one for the buckle. Basically, start off with longer than you need and you can cut them down. So with those measurements worked out, I'm going to cut this out and then we're going to flip it onto its front side and we will sort out where the holes go for stitching the rings in. As I should have mentioned it, both of these straps need to be the same width as your buckle. I've actually done these slightly too thick because I picked a different buckle, so I'm just going to thin these out again. They also don't have to actually be part of this collar. They could be two separate pieces that you rivet on. I like making it as one piece so it's nice and strong, but if you've got any leftover bits of leather that are already straps, you can always just have them and rivet them on to a rectangle that is the correct length. Either way is just as good as the other. So I've cut my straps down to 25mm now to accommodate the buckles. Now I need to work out where my hole centres are going to go to sew the rings on with. I've got 50 rings here, which means I need to divide the length of my leather by 51 so that they are centred. So that is 35.5 centimetres divided by 50, which makes 6.9. So basically every 7 millimetres I'm going to draw a dot, which will become a hole, which we will use to sew our rings onto the leather with. I'm going to take a smaller rule and I'm going to measure about 5mm down, maybe 6mm down. That will become where the line of our holes is, and then I'm just going to mark off every 7mm. So I've drawn my holes on. Now I'm just going to count them to check that everything is correct and I haven't confused myself and messed it all up. So there we go, 50 holes, all in the correct place. We have our holes marked, but that's where I'm going to leave them for the moment. Instead, I'm going to focus on getting the holes punched on the straps, because the next phase is actually dyeing the leather. To work out where the hole for our buckle needs to go, I'm just going to place the buckle on the strap. I want it to be fairly close to the piece, so I'm going to mark off just on the back of the leather, kind of roughly where the prong of the buckle sits. That is going to become the mark for our nice slotted hole. Just like that. And then we're going to try our buckle through again. Perfect. Then on the back, I'm going to mark 2 or 3 holes just in the middle where I'm going to rivet this piece down. Bash it down. That one's slightly off centre, but shouldn't worry about that. It will sit in there fairly nicely. Then we want to go back to our strap side. I'm going to put a larger punch into my punch. I'm going to measure, say, every inch or so for a hole, and then punch them in. And there we go. That is all of our holes, apart from the ones for the rings, punched in. I'm now going to dye the leather. So we have our messy work surface, I have my leather dye, I have a dauber, just as before. I'm going to cover this white leather in red dye. And that's us done. The white leather that we've got is particularly nice to dye, so I don't actually have to do a second coat on it. While I leave that to dry, I'm going to take out our second piece of leather. This is what we are going to use to bind the edge. Much like the braces I did yesterday, we're going to have a nice leather bound edge at the top that will help hold the rings in, it will tidy up the edge, make it look really nice, and it will also make it more comfortable. So I've got some very thin leather here that I'm going to use. I'm going to cut it very similar to the collar actually. It's going to be the same length, and I'm also going to do it 50mm wide. So if you've used a template to cut your collar out, perhaps use the same template for this piece as well. Now that our nice soft bit of leather is cut to length and size, I'm going to hand it over to Andy, who is going to glue this on for me. What we're going to do is, this is the top edge here with the holes in. You can see them very faintly. This is why we did them in biro. I'm going to flip it over and we're going to glue about 10mm of this leather onto the back here. So in our case, it's actually going to line up with the top of the straps. And we're going to glue that in place to save us a bit of hassle later. Because then, when that's together, we can punch the holes through, we can fold this over, then we can sew, then we can punch the holes in this front bit and we can sew everything down.
I'm just contact gluing this down. The last time I used the contact glue in the workshop had a very, very poor effect on me and Matt. So I've learnt my lesson now, we're not going to do it in there anymore. Always use a ventilated area, or go outside if you can. Basically, I am going to make sure that this part that I'm gluing right now, this is for the front. I'm going to glue down the front first so that we get a nice straight even edge, and then I'm going to glue the back half to the back of the stand up collar part. So this is going to fold over the chainmail. nice and presentable. You've seen me using contact adhesive before. It's not really very exciting, I'm afraid. Very much more of the same. I'm just going to let that go dry, which it has. And we're going to put a second layer on, and then we're going to glue it together. Once both those surfaces are dry, I'm just going to press that down using the guideline that Matt drew for me, just to get that edge nice and even. There we are. I'm gonna push that on, and there we are, all glued, ready to be punched.
Thank you, Andy. So that is all glued down. We've got the top ready to go. I've remarked where my holes are. You'll notice this is now spun around. The holes were originally here. However, I just had to rearrange them when it got glued down. But it's all well and good. It wasn't that hard, and these are never going to get seen underneath the chain anyway. So I'm now going to place my chain on top of the leather so that we can work out where the height of this row of holes needs to go. So that's how much overlap we're going to get. I can roughly see where the hole is, and it's about there. So there's no particular way of working that out, it's just kind of eyeballing it and seeing what looks right. In this case it is 10mm away from that edge. So now that I've worked out where it needs to go, I'm going to flip it over and we're going to draw on the inside where you're not going to see it. That's all of our holes marked. I'm now going to punch them out. So, as you may have noticed, there's been a little bit of toing and froing in this project. I'm going to take a break from this area and go back down to here. We are going to put the buckle in and rivet that down so that it is in place and out of the way when I get round to doing the sewing of the chainmail. So, if you will follow me over to the anvil, we're going to hit this in. Right, we are at the home stretch. Everything on our collar is now done. I'm going to take some thread and a needle, and I am going to start sewing the chain on. So I've got my long straggly bit of thread. I'm going to start on the inside so I can hide the end of it. I'm going to start on the second hole from the end, not the first. We're going to go back on ourselves and then around to hold it all in place. I'm going to start there. I'm going to come up through the first one and then through the strands because I've doubled this thread over. That will help lock it in place. Hopefully I'll hide the tail of this thread in the binding. We're going to go through our first ring, through the top hole, get caught everywhere of course, and then get very annoyed at ourselves. Then we're going to go through the top of the second hole, into the second ring, down all the way down to the bottom and pull it tight. When we're going to do a running stitch all the way along, and then we're going to come back, and at the very end I am going to go over that last edge just to hold everything in. coming up to the end now. Of course, like usual, I gave myself loads of thread, but of course gave myself way too much. It's always hard to judge, and I always hate getting to the end of a project and then having an inch or two less thread than I actually need. So I've always overestimated, but now of course we've gone full circle and I usually estimate about 2 meters more thread than I actually need. So, oh well, we're coming up on the last bits, and as we get to the end here, and I'm going to loop round twice so that it's all nice and secure, pulling it tight. Then on the back I'm going to put my needle under the thread, maybe knot it round itself as well. You can always put a little dab of super glue on if you wish, to keep things extra strong and together. And then what I'm going to do as a last precaution, I'm going to chop those threads off. I'm then going to double knot on the inside, nice and tight. Cut them off. And then we, my friends, are completed. And there we go, our chain collar is all finished. The front and the back are just as tidy as each other. And I'm just going to show you it. You can then always loop that strap back on itself to hold it in place in the buckle. But there we go. One nice copper collar, perfect for any adventurer or quester in the wilds or at home, or just as a nice fashion accessory. I hope you have enjoyed our series of tutorials. I hope you've enjoyed watching the Explorer's Box come together. We are now done. That's it. We've got one more video, well, technically 2 more videos to do, but we've got our roundup tomorrow where Andy and I are going to come together and show you everything we've done. And then of course we're going to video the draw on the 27th. So make sure you get your pictures into us if you haven't already. I hope you've enjoyed watching everything, and then it's been a lovely time during Advent. I've been Matt. This has been the Explorer's Box. It's been a wonderful 24 days. Thank you all for watching, and I hope we will see you again soon. Bye.